Good evening. We live in the world that is in the midst of a massive economic crisis. They're calling it an Arab Spring, or the Middle Eastern quest for democracy or something. But it's not. It's economics. It's happening in Greece, it's happening in Spain, it happened in Argentina, it happened in the Ukraine, it happened with Ceausescu. Our governments have been squeezing us too hard. The people cannot bear it. With taxes. Taxes to afford all those wonderful things that wonderfully mouthed politicians say they want for us, but really for themselves. Create a pool of money and the sharks will dive in. The Hilton Shark Hotel. America is bankrupt. The government debt externally, and the private debt and company debt and financial debt and banking debt throughout the world has been approximated at $50 trillion. But hold on, this is exactly and all that America is worth. Yes, that's right. America is worth a finite, fixed amount of money. It's not infinite, it doesn't go on forever. It's not ... or fill in the zeros and off it goes. No. We have an economic theory that requires us to think in terms, for its operation, of an infinite number of firms and perfect competition. Where do they meet? Off in the midst of eternity, or infinitude, way out there. Except that America is only worth $50 trillion. And that's its debt. The collateral and the debt match up. They can't borrow one more dollar. Not really. What have they got to square it with? No banker would lend you money that he couldn't possibly get a return on. And neither will the world. Our New Zealand dollar is worth 81 cents to the American dollar. But my friends around me are losing their businesses and losing their jobs and going bankrupt. So it's not according to the well-being and performance of New Zealand or the New Zealand economy. It's because the American economy is doing so badly at base. It may have some spectacular anecdotal stories yet to tell, and the news will concentrate on them. We live in a Murdochian reality after all, and all the journalists one day will want to work for Mr. Murdoch, so they tailor their truth to that Murdochian view of the world, which is a false view, and it's dangerous even for him and all his oligarchic companions. Mr. Rockefeller, please listen. And Kissinger and other people who believe in the great American empire, the imperial hegemony. No, it could all go in 18 months, or very, very briefly, 3 years, 5 years, 8 years. Who would give it longer? Now that's the context. And our government is charging poor people and middle income people and rich people about 50% in real tax terms, and I think very recently they've gone over the level. So that public servants momentarily are living better than private businesses in many cases. Level for level. This cannot be. It cannot continue. It is a foolish delusion, and it can only ever spike upwards within the bounds of one generation. It cannot continue on to another generation. It is not sustainable. The economy is economoia. It is household management, and it is also a living organism. Economoia australis, economoia pacifica, economoia aotearoa, economoia wellingtonia, economoia hamiltonian, and so on and so forth. It's a living organism, always has been, always will be, and it requires all the stakeholders and all the players to benefit before people pull their feet out of the mud and put their back into it. You see, if some in a sinking ship are using the oars to bash in the fingertips and the fingernails and the knuckles of those struggling for survival, do you not mind if the survivors think the best point they can make is to sink the ship? They will. They'll just drag their feet. They dragged their feet in Russia until it collapsed. Human hearts live in a living entity, in an economoia, a living hive activity of humanity. This is the only way they ever will live. You cannot, even slaves, you cannot force to work beyond, the calorific level, beyond what it is possible for a human heart, as a human animal even, to work. There are limits. There are always limits. And if you don't want them to rise up, there are political limits. We will come calling. So beware, you see. You do have a body. We can touch you. We can reach you. And this is what people have a recourse to throughout history. They threw out Ceausescu for the same reason. We're being told this story that the Middle East is uprising at the moment, but it is really economics, and we've seen it in Romania, and the Ukraine, and Spain, and Greece, Portugal, Ireland, Iceland, Argentina. Our governments have been too hard on us. Bring back Magna Carta, and it can still be appealed to culturally and historically, and its derived principles that the government should not bear heavily upon its citizens. This has always been the liberation cry, and we will hear it again, even to the point of civil distress, severe civil distress in this country. And we've stirred it up ourselves, the Maori Renaissance, and the aspirations, the lies we've been told. You cannot hand us a candy or seem to hand us and then pull it away without the child being upset. He will be very upset and will give vent to his upset without let of any kind. Now, I say that we need limits put on taxation written into a constitution, and anything else is a joke. Democracy without it is a joke. We must have limits to our governments. Our governments are a main factor, not everything. I think the oligarchic forces from without, seducing and lobbying and buying up our politicians, turning them to traitors and treasonous and treacherous quislings. And they shall pay the penalty of that treachery. They must. It is a universal human right to see that along the avenue of history that justice prevails against the enemies of an entire people. that no man should line his pocket by plundering and pillaging and raping his own country. No man. No man. But at the moment, within the country, what we have control over as citizens of the country of New Zealand are the excessive taxes. We have seen a decade or more of unusual marketing and unusual credit arrangements stretching forth this period as if it were to continue. Well, it is not continuing. There are too many mortgagee sales. There are too many bankruptcies. Something very much is amiss. Something very much is afoot. And it will bear down on our heads heavily unless we behave in a wise fashion. And I think we should roll back the taxes immediately and begin to unravel the state of our dominion. That the intrusion of government in our lives is too great. We must strike a blow for freedom. You know, our colonial governance was under about 10% or so taxes. That was all. And many people paid nothing. Not a thing, not a penny. That was when this country was built up. Everything was built up. It was vigorous. It was strenuous, and people put their backs into it and worked hard. That's how you build a country. And as soon as you have all these tax mongers come along and take, tarry and take, tarry and take, you know, you have a country that's robbed, that's blind with stupidity, it's bewildered, it's wondering, you know, where the money is scurrying away from between its legs. You know, and there's a bunch of bankers and lawyers and smart politicians off in the sidelines laughing in the shadows. But they are caught out whenever a collapse actually occurs. They're seen then by all the people to have their hand in the till. And a contemptible parliament is contemptible, no matter how much privilege you give yourself. And a contemptible court is contemptible. You know, contempt for contemptible behaviours of quislings and plunderers and pillagers, those who rob their own country, is as natural as breathing, to have nothing but contempt, cold-blooded contempt, full-blooded, fierce and severe disgust and contempt for evil, anger too, wrath and fury that will not be put aside by some smart turn of phrase. And the people are rising up in Spain and in other places to show their wrath at the bankers and the IMF and how it has intruded upon countries and interfered with our lives, our personal lives and our households. Why should we pay a debt that has been repaid and repaid and repaid many, many times over the course of decades, and in some cases hundreds of years? Why should we pay a penny more? These bloodsuckers. So, seeing these things, our 10% tax is fair, is, you know, that's that's governance with law. But when you have 20% tax, you've got governance with lawyers. Now the rule of law is good, but the rule of lawyers is bad. And then you have 30% real real taxes. I don't mean just income taxes. I mean this is all the customs taxes and tariffs and fees and charges and revenue gathering, parking fines and rubbish bags and ACC and KiwiSaver. It's a form of revenue gathering for government. Anything that is at all that is tax, you could regard it and pull it together as tax for the plunder of politicos and evil persons. This country is sick with corruption. It is dog-eared and daggy-bottomed with corruption. It's disgusting. It makes me puke. We've got the wrong economic theory. We must have a finite economic theory in a finite world. And so I have pegged economoia to population, and I've invented myself population economics. You will have to see my other videos. This video probably doesn't entirely stand on its own. I'm talking about the O'Sullivan limit here, the 45% in one generation, but there is another video to follow this one, where it's the Phillip O'Sullivan limit, which is the 20% real tax rate limit that no government should step over for sustainable economoia. Sustainable, generation on generation on generation. You keep below 20%, you can run it for 120 years, 300 years, 1,000 years if you want. But you cannot run anything that goes over 45%, even if briefly, within one generation. You will have a collapse. We are collapsing. We are having an economic collapse. The Christchurch earthquake is nothing compared to the economic crisis we're having before Christmas, before that earthquake even occurred. And what this government and other governments leading up to, is not this government alone, but the Helen Clark government, the David Lange government and other governments leading up to this time. And democracy itself is at fault. The democracy that